My name is Jennifer Reeder. I'm the director of a short film here in the Berlinale competition and also nominated for a Teddy Award called Blood Below the Skin. It chronicles a week in the life of three young girls leading up to the high school dance as two of the girls fall madly in love.
Would you say that your film is a typical coming-of-age story or not?
Oh, absolutely. It's I mean, on the one hand, the coming of age, it takes place during adolescence, which is always typically thought of as the sort of coming of age sort of era. But with this film and even the one that I did just previous to this, the adults are also kind of coming of age in a way, you know. So I like to exactly. So I like to think of these films as being like the suggesting that the coming of age process is like ongoing, and that adolescence is just one phase.
And was it intentional to cover like all these big political topics? The way I read it, class and race and politics. Was it important for you as a filmmaker to include that into your storytelling, or is it just a natural side effect?
No way. I feel like even though I make fiction films, and even fiction films that are sort of poppy with kind of, I don't know, songs and teen girls, I would try to inject some politics, some sense of social justice, for instance, And I mean, there's another part of my life that's much more clearly kind of activist, but I also think of these films as having, some activism in them, whether it's injecting them with, conversation about feminism or gender or sexuality or, sort of like race, class politics. I just don't know why someone wouldn't take an opportunity to make a statement at some point if they can, because films are so powerful in that regard.
Yes. So earlier you said that you did castings in like different high schools in Chicago, and I was wondering what's the awareness level of these young people these days in terms of sexuality and their rights and like claiming them? What did you encounter there?
Well, it's like, I mean, that's also sort of like one of the important aspects of the film is that the adult learns from the teenager. And at least in the U.S. culture, teenagers have no agency. They have a curfew. They can't gather in public. I mean, it's even sort of worse for young men. But we just don't put stock in what teenagers are aware of and have experienced and know. So a huge part of this film is really about recognizing, validating teenagers as interesting, curious, challenging humans. And one of the best parts about working with these teenagers themselves is that they're so smart. Like, they're really smart, genuinely interesting, people. And once you on set can sort of like get them talking about what they're interested in, then, you realize that they know exactly sort of like what's going on around them, and have a real sense of their own sort of, kind of place in the world and their own sort of sense of justice. And they're really kind of exploring their own kind of boundaries in terms of their sort of their sexuality and their friendships and their own like identity in terms of gender and race and sort of like where they're sort of coming from in terms of the sort of Chicago socioeconomics. So and sometimes I think when we get older, other things become more important. You have this family that you're taking care of, or you have this job that you're taking care of, and you sort of forget these kind of essential things that are really about the kind of politics of identity, and they are like totally invested in it. It's like every moment for them.
How, as a filmmaker, how do you create that like necessary atmosphere on set? Is it like a really traditional set, like film set when you shoot? Like, how does it describe like the atmosphere of your film sets?
Well, on the one hand, I didn't go to film school. I went to art school. So my film sets always feel like I'm just making it up as I'm going, or I'm saying like, are we doing this right? Like, is this what it looks like? Is this what we're doing? So I don't know if it's traditional, but I mean, there's a camera and lights and, me and a clapper and whatnot. But one of the reasons that we wanted to cast actual teenagers is for that authenticity. When you're casting and you ask for instance, like a 14-year-old, there's going to be an amount of 30-year-olds who show up, who maybe look 22, but they don't look 14. So the minute that you get this group of, actual teenagers on set, then they, it's the whole set sort of comes alive with the kind of like, giggling and chatter that really exists, among them. And they all got along really well. The three main girls I had used in a previous film, and so they actually already knew each other. And those moments when they hadn't seen each other for like a year or something like that, and they don't go to school together. So the minute they were back on set together, it's like, running towards each other. Yeah, and so it was like the real opposite of I think how so many films and even television portray especially teenage girls as being like really catty or bitchy or mean, right? When in fact, they're like a real secret society, and I think it's, they're looking at what's reflected back to them in media, and sometimes that they can absorb that. But the girls that I've worked with they were really generous and sweet with each other, and just like puppies in a way, like kind of like rolling on top of each other and like really affectionate, and that's what was really sweet to watch. And so we were able to kind of like, I never rewrote a scene, like on set or something like that, but I'd already experienced some of that energy. So kind of like writing a script and knowing that energy was going to come to the set and be really authentic was a great way to work.
The sad thing, I think, is that the U.S. is in such an intense crisis right now in terms of how the government and politics are treating its young people.
Yep.
And when a government starts treating its or not paying attention to youth and the future, it gets really dangerous, I think. And you mentioned earlier there's a crisis for men, and especially men of color. And you draw or like create this like really interesting parallel reality to. If you watch that film, you wouldn't immediately think it's kind of like in this like mainstream U.S. context.
Right.
So what powers do you have as a filmmaker to kind of like create these anti-worlds, meaning like opposed to that mainstream U.S. thing?
Well, on the one hand, like making a short allows, it's like I feel like with a short film you can kind of break the rules because the audience isn't necessarily, they're already looking at a short film as though it's out of context, The audience is already doing some work to kind of fill in some of the narrative, not the gaps, but some of these kind of the other narrative elements that in a feature, you just have to explain it all. You got to put all the parts in there. So I get away with a lot in terms of the form doing, a short. On the one hand, then shorts don't get to have the theatrical release as like a feature, so they don't have the exact same kind of accessibility. But again, I just feel like I wanted to, and this film really was for for the teenagers, like for the people who are in it. It's had a much bigger appeal, this is, in theory, our premiere is today, so in theory, no one has seen it, right? No one in the world has seen this film yet. But the film that I did previously, that's kind of a companion to it, has been widely popular. We screened it a year ago. It premiered at Rotterdam, and then it just screened again at Sundance, like just 2 weeks ago. So it's really had this pretty vibrant life that's been exploded up past the sort of teenage audience that I had intended for it. Because I think that at least American films just get that portrayal of teenage life wrong. And I remember when I was a teenager, you have like music, you have movies, you have your friends, and that's like your religion in a way, right? If you sort of having an awful day, you can retreat to your room and like turn on your your favorite song, or you watch your favorite movie for the 400th time, and it really is like. It kind of like can rejuvenate you in a way that adults do different things, I suppose, to sort of like, getting drunk or something like this or whatever, I don't know. But, which I don't recommend for teenagers, especially in the United States. So I wanted to kind of like, yeah, exactly. So I also wanted to make something that felt like a kind of a gift, to sort of like give back to them, and something that was really, reflecting that sort of girlhood, but reflecting a real specific kind of girlhood, even if it was like for the girls who like other girls, or for the girls who don't like anybody, who are maybe not even boy crazy, because so many films in the States, at least, so many films and so many TV, it's, if you're not a boy crazy girl, then, forget about it. And I just think that that's ridiculous. I wasn't a boy crazy girl in high school, and I wanted to make a film that was sort of more about like the girl like me, because I just think it takes one moment, or like the woman who does the young woman who does the monologue in the hallway, you know, about sort of like, I'm not a bitch, I'm not a slut, you know, like I think that for maybe a girl who's heard those words come back on her, I mean, I'm not to say that like my film would change someone's life, but maybe for a moment then, you know, it communicates to a young girl who says, you know what, that's true, like I'm not a tease and I'm not a slut and I'm not going to let someone call me those names, or I'm not going to sort of absorb that identity, you know?
Do you feel responsible as an American for your society?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and I know that like that's probably pretty rare, right? I mean, you know, there's lots and lots of just human citizens, but also filmmakers and artists who, you know, have no interest in a kind of social justice agenda. But I really, I don't. That would feel so selfish to me, you know, especially because art and literature and filmmaking and music, you know, when it gets the message right, it's like really transformative, you know. I mean, I'm always affected by films that stick with me and really have the ability to kind of like make me think about something maybe that's factual and historical, or something that's maybe still fictional but is a real social issue, and make me, you know, really think about, you know, my position towards that. And so, you know, those are the kind of films that I also, you know, that I want to make.
What do you expect from the audience? Do you expect anything, or do you want to get in, like, engage in a dialogue?
Yeah, you know, I always hope that my films are funny, or that there's funny moments, you know?
I mean, this one has
right?
a lot.
There's some good funny stuff.
Say, yeah.
So we went to the press screening the other day, which evidently no filmmakers do, because it can be frustrating to watch the press come in and out, but we found everyone sort of stayed in their seats, which was quite nice. But I just wanted to kind of see the projection. Wasn't even looking for a reaction, because of course the press are supposed to they don't clap, but there was lots of laughing. So, you know, I thought like, okay, I got some jokes right, and even some laughing with jokes that I don't think are as funny as other jokes, you know. So that kind of reaction, just knowing that, I mean, in the one that I've done just previous to this too was there's another kind of a singing moment in it that's much longer than the singing in this one, and you know, afterwards for that film, there's at least one person in the audience who comes up just sobbing, you know, who's like, I like your movie so much, you know. And you know, I don't want to make someone like sad or anything, but God, that like that's so crazy to sort of be able to like incite that kind of like emotional response from someone, you know, for something that's like a weird short fictional film, you know. So yeah, laughing and crying is always welcome.
Great, thank you so much.
Yeah,
and thank you for bringing this film.
Yeah,
to
right
the
on.
festival.
Yeah, cool.
Coming of age story or not?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, on the one hand, the coming of age, it takes place during adolescence, which is always typically thought of as the sort of coming of age sort of era. But with this film, and even the one that I did just previous to this, the adults are also kind of coming of age in a way, you know. So I like to exactly. So I like to think of these films as being like the suggesting that the coming of age process is like ongoing, and that adolescence is just one phase.
And was it intentional to cover like all these big political topics? The way I read it, you know, class and race and, you know, politics. Was it important for you as a filmmaker to include that into your storytelling, or is it just a natural like side effect?
No way. I feel like even though I make fiction films, and even fiction films that are sort of, my name is Jennifer Reeder. I'm the director of a short film here in the Berlinale competition, and also nominated for a Teddy Award, called Blood Below the Skin. It chronicles a week in the life of three young girls leading up to the high school dance, as two of the girls fall madly in love.
Would you say that your film is a typical
poppy with kind of, I don't know, songs and teen girls? I would try to inject some politics, you know, some sense of social justice, for instance, you know. And I mean, there's another part of my life that's much more clearly kind of active.